I collapsed and needed emergency surgery. My son and his wife ignored all my calls from the hospital. 1 week later, I came home to find a sold sign in our house. My stuff in boxes on the street with a note, "Handle it." So I cut contact. A year later, when they learned how much I was worth on national TV, 99 plus missed calls. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I desperately tried to reach my phone as the pain in my abdomen was like a hot poker twisting through my intestines. At 63, I'd had health scares before, but this was terrifying. My fingers managed to dial 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? The voice seemed miles away as black spots danced across my vision. I think my appendix burst, I gasped. I can't stand up. The paramedics arrived quickly. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I grabbed my phone. My son, I mumbled. Need to call my son. Timothy had been my rock since Robert passed 5 years ago. He and Jessica lived just 20 minutes away in the suburban home I'd helped them buy with nearly half of Robert's life insurance money. Timothy, I whispered as the call connected. Sirens wailing overhead. I'm being taken to Memorial Hospital. Emergency surgery, they think. The pain made complete sentences impossible. Mom, what? I can barely hear you. He sounded distracted. Glasses clinking in the background. We're at the Petersons' dinner party. Can this wait until morning? Before I could respond, pain crashed over me and I cried out, dropping the phone. The last thing I remember was the paramedic saying something about sepsis. I woke 3 days later in recovery. The surgeon told me I'd been lucky. Another hour and the infection might have been fatal. Through the fog of medication, I reached for my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Did my son visit? I asked the nurse. Timothy Blake? She checked my chart and shook her head. No visitors recorded. We can call him if you'd like. Over the next 4 days, I called Timothy 17 times. Each call went to voicemail. I left messages. First worried, then confused. Finally angry. Jessica's phone just rang endlessly. They're probably busy, I told myself. But the knot in my stomach had nothing to do with my incision. On my 7th day in the hospital, Dr. Kaplan signed my discharge papers. You'll need help at home for at least a week, she warned. No lifting, limited movement, someone to change your dressings. My son will help, I lied, forcing a smile. I took a taxi home. As we turned onto Maple Street, something looked different about my house. The modest ranch where I'd lived for 30 years, raised Timothy, built a life with Robert. Then I saw it. A sold sign planted firmly in my front yard. The taxi driver noticed my shock. You okay, ma'am? I couldn't answer, fixated on the cardboard boxes stacked along my porch. My belongings, photos, clothes, kitchen items all packed up. But I wasn't moving. At least I hadn't planned to. With shaking hands, I paid the driver and slowly made my way to the porch. Each step sending pain through my abdomen. Taped to the top box was a white envelope with Mom scrolled across it in Timothy's handwriting. The note inside was brief. Mom, we sold the house. New owners take possession next week. These are your personal items. Jessica packed what she thought you'd want. The rest is being donated. We found you an assisted living facility. Handle the details yourself. You always wanted independence, Timothy. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the railing to steady myself. The surgical pain nothing compared to the agony tearing through my heart. My son had sold my home while I was fighting for my life. Inside, the house was half empty. The living room furniture was gone. So was the dining set Robert had refinished for our 20th anniversary. My bedroom was stripped bare except for my mattress on the floor. In the kitchen, I found Jessica's designer coffee mug in the sink from her last visit. Next to it was a business card for Golden Sunset Assisted Living. The monthly cost was more than my entire Social Security check. My hands trembled as I dialed Timothy. This time he answered on the second ring. Mom, you're out of the hospital. Timothy Blake, what have you done? My voice was barely a whisper. What needed to be done? He replied maddeningly calm. Dad's been gone 5 years. That house is too much for you. You fell, Mom. You could have died alone in that kitchen. So, you sold my house without my knowledge while I was in surgery. It's our house too, Timothy said. Dad left it to both of us. That wasn't true. Robert had left the house to me, but I'd added Timothy to the deed years ago to avoid probate issues when I eventually passed. a decision I now deeply regretted. Where am I supposed to go? I demanded. That assisted living place costs $3,800 a month. I can't afford that. We'll help with the difference, Jessica chimed in, clearly listening on another phone. Besides, Mom, you have that annuity from Dad's insurance, and we've been paying your property taxes for years. Another lie. I'd paid every bill myself, plus helped them with their mortgage when Timothy was between jobs, but arguing felt pointless. I need to rest, I said finally. I just had major surgery. Of course, Timothy replied, softening slightly. The facility expects you Monday. I'll text you the address. I hung up without saying goodbye and did something I hadn't done since Robert's funeral. I sank to the floor and sobbed until my incision throbbed in protest. When the tears stopped, something else took their place. Cold, clear determination. I might be 63, recovering from surgery and apparently homeless, but I was still Martha Blake. And Martha Blake wasn't going down without a fight. I spent that night on my mattress on the floor. Pain medication making me drift in and out of consciousness as I formed a plan. By morning, determination had hardened into resolve. First, I called my oldest friend Ella Laner, who lived an hour away in Westfield. After hearing my story, punctuated by colorful curses I hadn't used since my teaching days, she didn't hesitate. Pack whatever you can fit in a suitcase, Martha. You're staying with me until you figure this out. Next, I called Walter Montgomery, my financial advisor for the past decade. Walter had helped me invest the other half of Robert's life insurance, the half Timothy didn't know about. Mrs. Blake, Walter said after I explained my situation, we should meet in person. How about tomorrow morning? By afternoon, Ella Laner had arrived in her sensible Volvo, face flushed with indignation. I can't believe Timothy would do this, she fumed, helping me into her car. After everything you've done for that boy. I winced from both physical and emotional pain. People change, Ellie. Apparently, my son is not the man I thought I raised. Ella Laner insisted I take her guest bedroom. She changed my dressings, administered my medication, and didn't comment when she found me crying at 3 a.m. The next morning, Walter met us at a small coffee shop. He was in his 70s with kind eyes that had seen too many elderly clients taken advantage of by family. Martha, he said, setting a folder on the table, I've reviewed your finances. The investment portfolio we set up with Robert's insurance money has performed exceptionally well. With the annuity and your Social Security, you have options. He slid a statement across the table. I stared at the number, then looked up in shock. This can't be right. Walter smiled. It's right. Robert was smart about those technology stocks, and you were wise to reinvest the dividends. You're not wealthy by New York standards, but you're comfortable enough to have choices. For the first time since seeing that sold sign, I felt hope. What about the house? I asked. Walter's expression darkened. That's more complicated. Since Timothy is on the deed, he technically had the right to sell. But, he added, seeing my face fall, there might be legal questions about selling without your consent, especially while you were incapacitated. I've contacted a friend at Wilson and Prattley. They specialize in elder law. Elder law. The phrase made me wheeze. I was 63, hardly ancient, though in that moment I felt 100 years old. What do you recommend? Eleanor asked. Walter closed the folder. First, secure your finances. Move your investments to accounts only you can access. Second, get legal advice about the house sale. Third, he paused, meeting my eyes. Decide what kind of relationship you want with your son going forward. That last question haunted me as Eleanor drove us back. What kind of relationship did I want with a son who would sell my home while I was in emergency surgery? Who would pack my life into boxes and leave them on the porch with a note that said, "Handle it." My phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. Facility address 1782 Pinewood Lane, Monday 9 a.m. We've paid the first month's deposit. I showed Ella Laner, my hand shaking with anger. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I closed my eyes, hearing Robert's voice. Never make big decisions when you're angry, Martha. Sleep on it. The right answer will come. I'm going to rest, I said finally, and then I'm going to make some calls. By Sunday night I had my answer. Monday morning came and I didn't show up at Golden Sunset Assisted Living. Instead, I sat in the office of Patricia Wilson, elder law attorney, signing papers that would change everything. You're absolutely sure about this, Mrs. Blake? Patricia Wilson asked, studying me over rimless glasses. Completely sure, I replied, signing the last document with a flourish. It had been 3 weeks since my hospital discharge. My incision was healing, and the fog of betrayal had cleared enough for strategic thinking. With Patricia's help, I'd filed a complaint about the house sale, though we both knew it might be an uphill battle given Timothy's name on the deed. More importantly, I'd restructured my finances. New accounts were opened, old ones closed. My investments were moved into a living trust with ironclad provisions. My will was updated, removing Timothy as executive and primary beneficiary. The paperwork to contest the house sale has been filed, Patricia said, organizing the documents. But these cases take time, and given the joint ownership, we may need to settle for financial compensation rather than recovering the property. I nodded, feeling lost as I thought about my home, the garden where Robert and I spent Sunday afternoons, the kitchen where I taught Timothy to bake cookies, the living room where we'd celebrated 30 Christmas mornings. I understand, I said. At this point, I'm more concerned with securing my future than fighting over the past. Patricia smiled. A healthy attitude now about your living situation. Have you decided? After careful consideration and multiple conversations with Walter, I'd made a surprising decision. I'm moving to Florida, I announced. Eleanor has a cousin in Naples with a small guest house for rent. It's affordable, close to the beach, and I smiled ruefully. Very far from Connecticut. And your son? The question hung between us. Timothy had called 17 times in the past week, the exact number of times I'd called him from the hospital. I hadn't answered once. Jessica had sent increasingly frantic texts about the assisted living facility, holding their deposit. Those went unanswered too. My son made his choice, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He chose to treat me as a burden, an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Now I'm making my choice. Patricia nodded, understanding in her eyes. Complete separation then? For now? Perhaps forever? I haven't decided. As I left the law office, the weight of that decision pressed on me. I'd carried Timothy inside me for 9 months. I'd nursed him through chickenpox and heartbreaks, celebrated his triumphs, consoled his failures. I'd been mother, father, and friend after Robert died. And now I was walking away. Was it right? I wasn't sure, but it was the only decision that preserved my dignity and self-respect. Eleanor was waiting in the car with a paper bag from our favorite bakery. How'd it go? It's done, I said simply. All of it. She handed me a warm cinnamon roll. Martha Blake, you are the strongest person I know. I laughed, though it sounded more like a sob. I don't feel strong, Ellie. I feel broken. Broken things can be mended, she replied, squeezing my hand. Sometimes they end up stronger at the broken places. 2 days later, I boarded a plane to Florida with 2 suitcases and a canvas bag containing the only photo albums I'd saved from the porch boxes. As the plane lifted off, I felt a mixture of grief and liberation. I was leaving behind a lifetime of memories, but also the weight of expectations that had slowly crushed me. Timothy tried calling once more before boarding. I sent it to voicemail, then listened as we reached cruising altitude. Mom, this is ridiculous. Where are you? The assisted living place is threatening to sue us for breach of contract. Call me so we can sort this out like adults. Like adults. The irony wasn't lost on me. I deleted the message, turned off my phone, and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming of empty houses and cardboard boxes. Naples, Florida, welcomed me with sunshine and warm air. Ella Laner's cousin Marge turned out to be a spirited 70-year-old widow, with a penchant for margaritas and strong opinions. Martha, you look like you need vitamin D and a stiff drink, she announced when I arrived. The guest house is ready, but first happy hour on the lie. The guest house was a charming converted garage with a kitchenette, bathroom, and small covered patio overlooking Marge's lush garden. At $800 a month, including utilities, it was a steal and light years from the sterile facility Timothy had selected. It's perfect, I told Marge, setting down my suitcases. Small, she corrected. But it'll do until you figure out your next move. Now come have that drink before the ice melts. Over the next 2 months, I settled into a healing routine. Mornings began with coffee on my patio, watching lizards skitter across the garden wall. 3 times weekly, I joined Marge for water aerobics at the community pool. Gentle exercise that strengthened my core without straining my tender abdomen. Afternoons, I explored my surroundings. Local museums, historic downtown, the public beach with its spectacular sunsets. Sometimes Marge joined me. Other times I ventured alone, savoring the anonymity of being just another silver-haired lady in a place full of retirees. I made friends slowly but steadily. Margie's book club welcomed me. The barista at the coffee shop learned my order. The librarian set aside mystery novels she thought I'd enjoy. Through it all, I maintained silence with Timothy. He called for the first month, each voicemail more frustrated than the last. Then the calls tapered off, replaced by occasional texts, ranging from angry, real mature mom ignoring your only child to manipulative Jessica and I are worried about you to coldly practical house sale finalized. Your share of proceeds is in escrow. I saved the messages but never responded. Patricia kept me updated on the legal situation. Our complaint was complicated by the joint ownership. The best outcome we could hope for was a fair distribution of the proceeds which Timothy was apparently holding in escrow. My new life was taking shape, but the wound of Timothy's betrayal remained raw. Some nights I still woke in tears, reaching for the phone before remembering why I couldn't call him. On those nights, I'd make tea and sit on my patio, looking at the stars and wondering how the child I'd raised with such love had become a stranger. For months after arriving in Naples, I received an unexpected email from Barbara Chan, a producer at a national morning show. She was working on a series about financial independence for women over 60 and had been given my name by Patricia. Your story of reclaiming your autonomy after your son's actions is exactly the kind of empowering narrative we're seeking. Barbara wrote, "Would you be willing to discuss your experience on camera? We would respect any privacy boundaries you wish to set." My first instinct was to decline. I'd never sought the spotlight, and discussing family troubles on television made my stomach clench. But something about the phrase empowering narrative stayed with me. Was that what I was doing? Empowering myself? It hadn't felt that way in the hospital or when I saw those boxes. It had felt like surviving, scrambling to stay afloat when the ground disappeared beneath my feet. But looking back at my decisions, refusing the assisted living facility, restructuring my finances, moving to Florida, I could see the thread of agency running through them. I hadn't just reacted. I'd responded by reclaiming control over my life. After sleeping on it, I wrote back agreeing to an initial call. That conversation led to another and eventually to an agreement. I would appear on the show to discuss financial independence for older women using elements of my experience without naming Timothy directly. The segment was scheduled to air in 2 weeks, almost exactly 1 year after my emergency surgery and the discovery of the sold sign. "Are you nervous?" Marge asked the evening before I flew to New York for taping. We sat on her lie watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Not nervous exactly," I said, finally, more resolved, like I'm turning a page. Marge nodded, understanding in her weathered face. "Good for you, Martha. Not everyone gets a second chapter. Might as well make it a page-turner." The next morning, I boarded a plane to New York with a suitcase containing a new outfit Marge had insisted I buy. A coral blazer over a cream shell paired with navy slacks and comfortable but stylish flats. "You look like a woman who has her act together," Marge had declared. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like that woman too. The television studio was smaller than expected, but bustling with activity. Barbara Chan, a petite woman with an elegant bob, greeted me warmly. "Martha, thank you for coming. We're pleased to have you for our reinvention at Any Age series." She introduced me to Sophia Martinez, who would conduct the interview. Then a flurry of production assistants, makeup artists, and sound technicians whisked me away. Soon I was in a chair where a young man named Paolo worked what he called camera-ready magic on my face and hair. "We're not changing you," he assured me, seeing my expression, "just enhancing what's already there." The transformation was subtle but effective. I looked like myself, just more polished, like the professional educator I'd been for 40 years before retirement. The interview itself passed in a blur of bright lights and careful questions. Sophia skillfully drew out my story without sensationalizing it. "So you found yourself suddenly facing a major life change not of your choosing," she prompted. "Exactly," I replied. "After my surgery, I discovered that my living situation had been altered without my input. It was devastating at first, but ultimately forced me to reevaluate everything, including your financial independence, especially that. I nodded. Like many women my age, I'd been somewhat passive about financial matters. My husband handled our investments, and after he passed, I continued with the same approach. The crisis pushed me to educate myself, to take control of my finances rather than just maintaining the status quo. We discussed the steps I'd taken: meeting with advisors and attorneys, restructuring investments, creating a sustainable budget for my new Florida life. Throughout, I emphasized the message Barbara and I had agreed was most important. It's never too late to take control of your financial future and your relationship with your son. Sophia asked gently. Has that been repaired? I'd been prepared for the question, but it still sent a pang through my heart. That's a work in progress, I said carefully. What I've learned is that healthy relationships require mutual respect. Sometimes establishing boundaries is the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and the other person, even when that person is family, especially then. I said, love shouldn't require sacrificing your dignity or security. Sophia nodded, then turned to the camera for her closing remarks. Martha Blake's story exemplifies how women are reclaiming their power at every stage of life. After a health crisis led to an unexpected housing change, Martha rebuilt her living situation and transformed her relationship with money. Today, at 64, she's financially independent with diversified investments generating approximately $68,000 in annual income, a figure that will increase as she approaches traditional retirement age. I froze. That number, my annual investment income, hadn't been part of our agreed-upon script. I'd shared it during preparation meetings with the understanding it would remain private. And perhaps most inspiring, Sophia continued, oblivious to my discomfort. She's building a new community in Florida, proving it's never too late to start fresh. Martha, thank you for sharing your journey. The red light on the camera blinked off and I exhaled slowly. Before I could speak to Barbara about the financial disclosure, I was whisked off set for photos. You were wonderful, Barbara assured me, appearing at my elbow as a production assistant removed my microphone. So authentic and relatable. The income figure wasn't supposed to be mentioned, I said quietly. Barbara looked embarrassed. I know, and I apologize. Sophia went off script. We can edit it out of the online version if you prefer. But it was too late for the live broadcast. My annual income, significantly more than Timothy and Jessica probably suspected, had just been announced to millions of viewers. Back in my hotel room that evening, I tried to shake off my unease. What did it matter if Timothy knew about my finances now? Our relationship was already fractured beyond repair. Yet I couldn't help wondering if he'd been watching, what he'd thought when he heard that figure. The answer came sooner than expected. As I packed for my return flight to Florida, my phone lit up with a text notification. Then another and another. Timothy, Mom. Just saw you on Morning America. Call me. Timothy, we need to talk ASAP. Timothy, are you really making $68K from investments? Where did that money come from? I set the phone down without replying, my hands suddenly shaky. For nearly a year, I'd maintained my silence, gradually building a life that didn't include my only child. Now, with one unscripted television moment, that careful distance was threatened. The phone buzzed again and again. By the time I finished packing, there were 17 text messages and 9 missed calls, all from Timothy. The irony wasn't lost on me. As my Uber approached the airport, a final text came through. Timothy, Mom. I know you're getting these messages. Jessica and I have been worried sick. We made a mistake with the house. We see that now. Please call us so we can make things right. We miss you. Miss me or miss access to my previously unknown income. The cynical thought appeared unbidden, hardening my resolve. I boarded my flight back to Florida without responding, wondering if I ever would. I'd been back in Naples for 3 days when my phone finally stopped its constant buzzing. 99 missed calls and over 60 text messages, all from Timothy and Jessica. I hadn't answered a single one. You'll have to deal with this eventually, Marge pointed out as we sipped iced tea on her lie. They're not going to just disappear. I dealt with it when I got on that plane a year ago, I replied more sharply than intended. Sorry, I didn't mean to snap. Marge waved away my apology. Honey, if anyone's earned the right to be snippy, it's you. But ignoring them forever isn't a plan. It's avoidance. I sighed, knowing she was right. The television appearance had changed things whether I wanted it to or not. What would you do? I asked. Marge considered this, her weathered face thoughtful in the golden afternoon light. I'd hear what they have to say. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve closure. Closure? Did I want closure with Timothy? Or was silent amputation closure enough? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. But this time it wasn't Timothy. It was Barbara-chan from the morning show. Martha, I hope I'm not disturbing you, she said when I answered. I wanted to check in after the segment aired. It's fine, I assured her, stepping inside for privacy. The feedback has been interesting, Barbara laughed. That's one way to put it. Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. The response has been extraordinary. Hundreds of women connected deeply with your story. I was surprised. Really? Absolutely. So many have experienced some version of what you went through, being sidelined in financial decisions, having their autonomy undermined by well-meaning or not so well-meaning family. Your willingness to rebuild has struck a chord. I felt a small glow of satisfaction. Perhaps some good could come from my painful chapter after all. We'd like to do a follow-up segment, Barbara continued. A more in-depth look at financial independence for women in their 60s and beyond. Would you consider coming back as a guest expert? Guest expert? The idea was both flattering and terrifying. Barbara, I'm hardly an expert. I'm just a retired teacher who learned some hard lessons late in life. And that's precisely why viewers connected with you. You're relatable, authentic. I hesitated, thinking about Timothy's barrage of messages. Appearing again would certainly pour gasoline on that particular fire. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. We're looking at taping in about 3 weeks. Let me know by next Friday. After hanging up, I sat on my sofa, mind racing. A year ago, I'd been a woman in crisis, betrayed, recovering from surgery, homeless. Now I was being asked to share wisdom with others. The transformation felt both surreal and empowering. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wilson. Call when convenient. New development in house matter. 20 minutes later, I listened with growing disbelief as Patricia explained the situation. The title company discovered an irregularity. She said, "It seems Timothy forged your signature on several documents." Forged my signature? I repeated, stunned. Are you sure? The notary who supposedly witnessed your signing has no record of it. When questioned, she was adamant she never notarized those documents. This changes everything, Martha. My mind reeled. Selling the house while I was incapacitated was cruel, but forgery was criminal. My own son had committed fraud. What happens now? I asked, barely above a whisper. We have options, Patricia replied. The most aggressive would be pressing criminal charges for fraud and forgery. Less extreme would be using this information to negotiate a much more favorable financial settlement. Criminal charges against Timothy. The thought made me physically ill despite everything he'd done. What do you recommend? I asked. Stalling for time. That depends on what outcome you want. Punishment? Compensation? Reconciliation? The path we choose should align with your ultimate goal. My ultimate goal. A year ago it had been simple survival. Then it evolved into rebuilding without Timothy. But now what did I truly want? I need to think, I said finally. Of course, Patricia replied. Take the weekend. But Martha, this is significant leverage. Whatever you decide, you're negotiating from a position of strength now. Strength? I'd found my strength over the past year. Building a new life brick by careful brick. The question now was how to use that strength. To punish, to heal, or something in between. As sunset painted the sky, I made a decision. I would respond to Timothy, not with anger or accusations, but with a simple invitation. If he wanted to talk, it would be on my terms, in my territory. I picked up my phone and sent a single text. I'll be at Seaside Cafe tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. Seaside Cafe sat at the edge of a public beach, its wooden deck offering unobstructed views of the Gulf. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see anyone approaching. The waitress, Donna, brought iced tea without asking. I'd become a regular. Meeting someone special today? She asked, noting the second place setting. My son, I replied, surprised by the catch in my voice. Donna squeezed my shoulder. Family's complicated. Holler if you need anything. I watched the parking lot, my heart rate increasing with each arriving car. At exactly 2 p.m., a silver rental car parked, and Timothy emerged, looking around uncertainly. He was thinner than I remembered, his normally clean-shaven face sporting a short beard. He spotted me and hesitated before making his way across the deck. I maintained a neutral expression, though my hands trembled slightly beneath the table. "Mom," he said, standing awkwardly beside the empty chair. He looked like he couldn't decide whether to hug me or shake my hand. In the end, he simply sat across from me. Up close, he looked exhausted. Dark circles, new lines around his mouth, silence stretched between us, heavy with a year of absence and decades of shared history. "You look good," he said finally. "Florida agrees with you." "Freedom agrees with me," I corrected, voice steadier than I felt. "But yes, the sunshine helps." Timothy winced. "I deserve that." "You deserve more than that," I replied, then took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't serve my purpose. "But I didn't invite you for a confrontation." "Why did you invite me?" After a year of silence, I considered the question, watching a pelican dive beyond the deck. "Curiosity mainly. I wondered what could possibly bring you to Florida after you were so eager to get me out of Connecticut." Timothy flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I raised an eyebrow. "You sold my home while I was unconscious. You packed my life into boxes and left them with a note saying, 'Handle it.' Then, when I didn't follow your plan, you went silent until I leaned forward slightly until you saw me mentioning my investment income on television. Suddenly, after a year of nothing, my phone explodes with 99 missed calls. I'd counted them. Exactly 99 calls before I'd sent my text." Timothy's flush deepened. "It wasn't about the money." "No. What was it about then?" He looked away. "We were worried about you living alone in that big house. After your emergency, it seemed like the perfect time to make a change. A change I never asked for or consented to. I pointed out a change enacted while I was fighting for my life. We thought we were helping." His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again. "Dad always said you were terrible with money. He joked you'd end up eating cat food in retirement if you didn't manage everything." The casual cruelty of both Timothy's assumption and the idea that Robert had spoken of me that way hit like a physical blow. "Your father never said any such thing," I said quietly. Certain of this, if nothing else, Robert respected me too much to speak about me that way. Timothy's expression flickered with uncertainty. Jessica said," I repeated, pieces clicking into place. "And you believed her over your own experiences with your father?" He didn't answer directly. "We were trying to protect you. Make sure you were taken care of by forcing me into a facility that would have drained my savings within 3 years, by selling the home I loved without my knowledge. That's a strange definition of care." He looked genuinely confused, and for the first time I considered that he might not fully understand what he'd done, the depth of the betrayal, the legal implications. "The house sale," I said carefully. "Tell me exactly how that happened." Timothy shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean?" "I mean, walk me through the process. How did you sell a house that was jointly in our names while I was in the hospital?" He cleared his throat. "Jessica handled most of it. She knows a guy in real estate who said it could be done quickly since both our names were on the deed. And my signature on the sale documents. How did that happen when I was unconscious?" Timothy paused slightly. "There were forms from years ago. Jessica found them in Dad's old files. She said we could use them as templates. Templates for forgery." I let the implication hang between us. "Do you understand what you did?" I asked finally. "Legally?" He swallowed hard. "It wasn't. We didn't think about it that way. We focused on getting you settled somewhere safe." "Somewhere safe," I repeated. "Away from my home, my community, my support system, somewhere that would have bankrupted me within 3 years. That was your definition of safety?" Timothy's eyes widened. "Bankrupted. But the annuity your father left pays $600 a month. Golden Sunset costs $3,800 a month. You do the math." He looked genuinely shocked. "But Jessica said your finances were solid for at least 10 years of care." I felt a chill despite the warm Florida afternoon. Jessica seems to have said a lot of things that weren't true. "I need a minute," Timothy said abruptly, pushing back from the table. He walked to the deck railing, staring out at the gulf, shoulders rigid with tension. I let him go, watching as he gripped the weathered wood, and took several deep breaths. The Timothy I'd raised had always been sensitive, quick to feel hurt, but equally quick to feel remorse. It was Jessica who had introduced that hard edge I'd glimpsed in the past year. After a few minutes he returned, his expression troubled but composed. "I've made a mess of things," he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed, not offering absolution. "You have. What happens now with the house? I mean, the sale went through. New owners have been living there for months." I sipped my tea, considering how much to reveal. "That depends. My attorney tells me we have options." "Your attorney?" he repeated, surprise crossing his face. "You've been working with a lawyer this whole time. Did you think I was just sitting on a beach feeling sorry for myself?" I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "I built a new life, Timothy. Part of that involved protecting myself legally and financially." He nodded slowly. "The investments they mentioned on the show, $68,000 a year. Was that real?" And there it was. The question that had prompted 99 phone calls after a year of silence. "Yes, it's real," I confirmed. "Your father left me well provided for. Contrary to whatever Jessica told you, we invested half his life insurance payout. The half you didn't know about because it wasn't used for your down payment." Timothy winced at the reminder. "I didn't know," he said softly, "about any of it. The money, the forgery. I trusted Jessica to handle the details. Because you thought I was incapable, I finished for him. A helpless old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs." "No," he protested, then stopped. "Maybe not exactly like that, but Mom, you've always been the emotional one. Dad handled the practical stuff. After he died, you seemed lost." The assessment stung, partly because there was a grain of truth in it. I had been lost after Robert died, grieving, struggling to learn systems he'd always managed. But I'd been adapting, growing stronger year by year. "Your father believed in me," I said finally. "Even when I didn't believe in myself. He left provisions to protect me. Not because he thought I was incapable, but because he wanted me to have time to find my footing. Time your actions nearly stole." Timothy's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mom." For the first time in our conversation, I felt the hard shell around my heart crack slightly. Not enough to forget or fully forgive, but enough to acknowledge his pain alongside my own. "Why did you come to Florida, Timothy? What do you want from me?" He looked up, eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I want to make things right. I don't know how, but I need to try. When I saw you on that show, confident, independent, thriving without us, it hit me what we'd done. And Jessica, what does she want?" Timothy's expression darkened. "Jessica and I are taking some time apart. After your TV appearance, she had a lot of questions about your finances, suggestions about how we might help you manage things. It made me uncomfortable." I wasn't surprised. Jessica had always struck me as calculating, though I'd kept those thoughts to myself out of respect for Timothy's choice. "I see," I said simply. "Mom." Timothy leaned forward, earnest now. "I know I can't undo what happened, but is there any way forward for us? Any path back to some kind of relationship?" The question hung between us, weighty with hope and fear. A year ago, I would have given anything to hear him ask that. Now I found myself weighing his words carefully, searching for manipulation or hidden motives. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Trust once broken isn't easily repaired. And you broke mine in the most fundamental way possible." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand." But I continued, surprising myself. "I'm willing to consider it. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps a path toward something new." For the first time since he'd sat down, Timothy smiled, a small tentative expression that reminded me of the boy who'd broken our neighbor's window, and confessed immediately, tearfully determined to make it right. "That's more than I deserve," he said softly. "Yes, it is," I agreed without rancor. "Which is why what happens next will depend entirely on your actions, not your words." I signaled for the check, ready to end our meeting while it remained civil. As Donna brought the bill, I added, "I have one question before you go. What would you have done if I hadn't appeared on television? If you hadn't learned about the investment income?" Timothy looked down at his untouched water glass, shame evident in his posture. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to say I would have come to my senses eventually, but honestly, I don't know. His honesty, painful as it was, felt like the first truthful exchange we'd had in years. "Thank you for that at least," I said, placing cash on the table. "Goodbye, Timothy. Will you let me call you? Maybe meet again while I'm in town." I paused, standing to leave. "Text first. I'll decide each time whether I'm ready to talk." As I walked to my car, I felt lighter somehow, as if setting clear boundaries had freed me from unmet expectations. Whether Timothy and I ever rebuilt a relationship remained to be seen, but I was approaching the possibility from a position of strength rather than need. That evening, I called Patricia Wilson and explained my decision. "I don't want criminal charges," I told her, "but I do want a fair settlement from the house sale, the full market value of my share, plus compensation for the emotional distress of being displaced while recovering from surgery." "That's entirely reasonable," Patricia assured me. "I'll draw up the paperwork." After we hung up, I sat on my patio watching the sunset, feeling strangely at peace. The wound of betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was Martha Blake, survivor, rebuilder, and now perhaps someone with wisdom worth sharing. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Barbara Chen. "I'm in for the follow-up segment. Let's help other women find their financial independence." The 3 weeks before my second television appearance passed in a blur of preparation and cautious reconnection. Barbara sent talking points which I studied diligently. Patricia finalized the settlement agreement which Timothy signed without argument, agreeing to pay me the full market value of my half of the house plus $25,000 for emotional distress. Timothy remained in Naples, renting a condo across town. We met twice more. Once for coffee, once for a beach walk. Our conversation stayed careful, circling safe topics. My water aerobics, his work projects, the novel I just finished. We avoided mentioning Jessica or the house, as if those subjects were still too raw. The day before I was due to fly to New York for taping, Timothy invited me to dinner at an upscale seafood restaurant overlooking the bay. "A proper meal before your big television appearance," he explained when he picked me up. "You're becoming quite the media personality." I laughed hardly. 2 segments on the same morning show doesn't make me Oprah. The restaurant was elegant without being stuffy, with crisp tablecloths and windows showcasing the sunset. After we ordered, Timothy seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his water glass and checking his phone repeatedly. "Is everything all right?" I asked finally. "You seem distracted." He took a deep breath, setting his phone down. "I have something to tell you. 2 things, actually." The seriousness of his tone made me brace myself. "Go on." "First, Jessica and I are getting divorced." He stated it flatly without visible emotion. "The paperwork was filed last week." Though I'd gathered their relationship was strained, the finality still surprised me. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it despite everything. Divorce was painful regardless of circumstances. Timothy shrugged. "It's been coming for a while. The situation with you just brought our differences into focus. Jessica has priorities I didn't fully understand until recently." I nodded, waiting for him to continue to. "The second thing is about work. I've been offered a position with my company's Florida office here in Naples." This was unexpected. "You're moving here permanently?" "I'm considering it," he said carefully. "It's a lateral move career-wise, but the cost of living is lower, quality of life higher." And he hesitated. "It would give us a chance to rebuild if you're willing." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. Instead, I saw only nervous hope and familiar features, the slight asymmetry of his smile, the way his left eyebrow arched higher when uncertain. "What about your life in Connecticut?" I asked. "Your friends? Your house?" "The house was more Jessica's than mine," he admitted. "As for friends, I've realized lately how much of my social circle was built around her preferences. It might be good to start fresh." Start fresh. The phrase resonated, echoing my own journey. "If you move here," I said carefully, "we would need clear boundaries. I've built a life here that I'm proud of and protective of." He nodded quickly. "Of course, I'm not asking to move in or insert myself into your daily routine, just to be nearby. To have the opportunity to show you over time that I can be someone you trust again." Before I could respond, our appetizers arrived. Crab cakes for him, shrimp cocktail for me. We fell silent as the waiter arranged the plates and refilled our water glasses. Once we were alone again, I took a bite of shrimp, gathering my thoughts. It won't be easy, I said finally. Rebuilding trust never is. I know, he replied quietly. But I think it's worth trying. You're my only family, Mom. The simple statement hung between us, weighted with decades of history, birthdays and graduations, arguments and reconciliations, the shared grief of Robert's death. Despite everything, blood and memory bound us in ways that couldn't be easily severed. If you move here, I said, choosing words carefully, we start as neighbors, not as mother and son, living in each other's pockets. We build whatever comes next slowly with respect for each other's independence. Relief washed over his face. I can work with that. As we continued our meal, conversation shifted to lighter topics. Local restaurants he tried, the community theater production I'd attended with Marge, the book club I joined. It felt, for brief moments, almost normal, like we were finding our way back to some version of the relationship we'd once had. After Timothy dropped me off, Marge was waiting on her lie, a glass of wine in hand, and another poured for me. Well, she asked as I settled beside her, how was dinner with the prodigal son? I took a sip, processing my mixed emotions. Surprisingly good. He's getting divorced and considering moving to Naples. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. Moving here? How do you feel about that? Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me is still angry, still hurt. Another part remembers the little boy who crawled into my lap during thunderstorms. The teenager who brought me breakfast in bed every Mother's Day. The young man who sobbed on my shoulder at his father's funeral. People are complicated, Marge observed. They can be both the ones who hurt us and the ones who heal us, sometimes in the same lifetime. Poetic, I teased gently. She laughed. I have my moments. But seriously, Martha, what does your gut tell you? I considered the question, watching the last colors of sunset fade, that everyone deserves a second chance. Not a clean slate. Actions have consequences, but a chance to be better than their worst mistake. Wise woman, Marge approved, clinking her glass against mine. Just don't forget to protect that heart. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean setting yourself up to be hurt again. Trust me, I assured her. Those lessons are permanently etched in my soul. Later that night, as I packed for New York, I found myself humming softly, an old habit from happier days that had disappeared after Timothy's betrayal. The tune was one Robert used to whistle while gardening, a melody that had once been the soundtrack to our family's ordinary happiness. The realization made me pause, hand hovering over my toiletry bag. Was I ready to risk happiness again? To open myself to the possibility of both joy and pain that came with genuine connection? The answer came not as a certainty, but as a willingness to find out. The television studio felt familiar this time, almost comfortable. I greeted Barbara with a hug and chatted easily with the makeup artist while he worked his magic. You seem different from your last visit, Barbara observed as we reviewed the segment outline. More settled somehow. I smiled, realizing she was right. A lot has happened since we last spoke. Good things mostly. Care to share? It might add dimension to the segment. Briefly, I told her about the settlement, Timothy's visit, and our tentative steps toward reconciliation. That's remarkable, Barbara said. Many people would have chosen a more punitive path after what you experienced. I shrugged. Punishment has its place, but it doesn't necessarily bring healing. I'm more interested in moving forward than looking back. Barbara made a note on her tablet. Would you be comfortable discussing that on air? The balance between accountability and forgiveness. It's a universal struggle that would resonate with viewers as long as we focus on broader principles rather than specific details. I agreed. I'm not interested in publicly shaming my son. The segment itself went even better than our first. This time I was paired with a financial advisor who specialized in helping women take control after major life transitions, divorce, widowhood, retirement. Together we offered practical advice on investment strategies, legal protections, and the emotional aspects of financial independence. When the conversation turned to family dynamics, I spoke carefully but honestly. The most important thing is establishing clear boundaries. It's possible to maintain loving relationships while still protecting your financial autonomy. In fact, healthy boundaries often lead to healthier relationships in the long run. And what about forgiveness? Sophia asked following Barbara's suggested addition. Many viewers have experienced financial betrayal by family members. How do you balance accountability with moving forward? I took a moment to consider my response, aware Timothy might be watching. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the harm never happened, I said finally. It means choosing not to let that harm define your future. For me, it's been about requiring accountability. Yes, but also recognizing that people can learn and grow from their mistakes, including me. After taping, Barbara pulled me aside. That was perfect, Martha. Authentic and hopeful without being saccharine. We've already received emails responding. It's clearly striking a chord. I'm glad, I said, meaning it. If my experience can help other women avoid similar pitfalls or find their way back after betrayal, then something good has come from a difficult time. We'd love to have you back, Barbara said as we parted. Perhaps as part of a recurring panel on financial empowerment. Think about it. I promised I would, though the idea of becoming a regular television personality still seemed surreal. Martha Blake, retired elementary teacher as a financial independence guru. Robert would have laughed in delight at the unexpected twist. Back in my hotel room, I found a text from Timothy. Just watched the segment. You were amazing, Mom. Proud of you. The simple message brought tears to my eyes. Not because I needed his approval. I was long past that, but because it suggested he was finally seeing me as I truly was. Not just his mother, but a whole person with strengths he'd previously overlooked. I typed back, thank you. Flying home tomorrow, dinner next week. His response came immediately. Name the day. I'll be there. The next morning, as my plane descended toward Florida, I gazed at the glittering Gulf waters and verdant landscape below. A year ago, I'd made this journey as a woman in crisis, betrayed, displaced, unsure of my future. Now I was returning as someone transformed, not just surviving but thriving. The settlement money had been deposited into my account the previous day, enough to purchase a small condo of my own when I was ready to leave Margie's guest house. My second television segment had opened doors to potential opportunities, and Timothy and I were cautiously rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. None of it had come easily. The pain of betrayal had been real and devastating. The work of rebuilding financially, emotionally, practically had required every ounce of courage and resilience I possessed. But as the plane touched down, I felt profound gratitude for the journey, difficult as it had been. Without the crisis, I might never have discovered my own strength. Without the betrayal, I might never have learned to stand firmly in my own power. Without the loss, I might never have found the freedom to create a life truly my own. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Naples. The local time is 2:17 p.m., and the temperature is a beautiful 82 degrees. I smiled at the word beautiful, thinking how aptly it described not just the weather, but this unexpected chapter of my life. At 64, I had emerged from the darkest experience into something unexpectedly luminous. A future entirely of my own making. As I walked through the terminal, my phone buzzed with another text from Timothy. Just heard from the realtor. Got approved for the condo rental. Moving date set for next month if job offer finalizes this week. I tucked the phone away without responding immediately, neither embracing nor rejecting this new development. Time would tell whether Timothy had truly changed, whether our relationship could be rebuilt on healthier foundations. For now, it was enough to know that I could face whatever came next from a position of strength, clarity, and hard-won wisdom. Outside the airport, the Florida sunshine welcomed me home. Not to the home I'd lost, but to the one I'd created for myself out of necessity and courage. As I hailed a taxi, I caught my reflection in the terminal's glass doors. Back straight, eyes clear, face determined. Where to? The driver asked as I settled in. Home, I replied simply. Then I gave him Marge's address, smiling at how right it felt to call it that. Home, after all, wasn't just a place. It was a state of being. One where you knew your own worth, set your own terms, and lived by your own lights. It had taken losing everything to find that truth. But now that I had it, no one could ever take it away again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.